Welcome to Vindication Stories with Aria. They said my marriage to Oliver was desperate, pathetic, and the biggest mistake of my life. My own sister called it charity work at my engagement party. My mother whispered to relatives that I was settling for scraps. And my best friends? They placed actual bets on how long it would last before I came to my senses. Then Oliver's company went public, making him worth $4.2 billion overnight, and suddenly everyone who mocked our love wanted front row seats to our success. My name is Cassandra Rivers. I'm 29 years old, and if you think you know how this story of betrayal, billions, and ultimate vindication ends, stay tuned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happens when the people who claim to love you spend 2 years tearing down the most important decision of your life, only to discover they were catastrophically wrong about everything? The wedding planning should have been the happiest time of my life. Instead, it became a masterclass in humiliation. Every dress fitting came with unsolicited advice. "Are you sure about this, Cass?" my sister Penelope would ask, adjusting my veil with the enthusiasm of someone attending a funeral. "He's sweet, but he's so ordinary." Ordinary. That word followed Oliver everywhere. My college roommate Jasmine used it during our engagement dinner. My cousin Rebecca whispered it at the bridal shower. Even strangers at the coffee shop in Millbrook seemed to look at us and think it. Here I was, Cassandra Rivers, with my marketing degree from Westfield University, my corner office at Brennan & Associates, and my carefully curated Instagram feed, settling for a guy who drove a 10-year-old Honda and wore the same 3 button-down shirts to every social event. But here's what they didn't see. Oliver Thorne wasn't ordinary. He was extraordinary in ways that couldn't be measured by designer labels or expensive cars. While they were judging his thrift store blazers, I was watching him code until 3 a.m., building something revolutionary. While they mocked his packed lunches and discount haircuts, I was falling in love with a man who chose to live simply so he could invest every spare dollar into his startup, Nextstream Technologies. "He's using you," my mother Delilah said over lunch at the Rosewood Country Club, her voice sharp enough to cut crystal. "Men like that target successful women. You'll be supporting him for years while he plays with his little computer projects." I tried to explain. Oliver wasn't some deadbeat with a pipe dream. He had 2 computer science degrees from Sterling Institute of Technology. His app development company was already generating revenue. He was building something that could change how people interact with technology. But every word I spoke seemed to bounce off their judgment like rain off a windshield. The worst moment came at my bachelorette party. We were at Velvet Lounge in downtown Millbrook, and I was trying to enjoy what should have been a celebration of my upcoming marriage. Instead, it turned into an intervention. "We love you, Cassie, my best friend since high school," Natasha said, her words slurring slightly from the champagne. "But we can't watch you throw your life away. You're 29. You have options. Real options." "What kind?" I asked, though I already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "Like Derek Ashford," Jasmine chimed in. "He's had that new investment firm, the penthouse downtown, the Aston Martin." "His name is Oliver," I said quietly, "and I love him." "Love doesn't pay the bills," Penelope laughed, not kindly. "Look, we get it. He's probably great in bed, and he worships the ground you walk on. But passion fades, Cass. What are you going to do when you're 40, still driving his beat-up car and shopping at discount stores?" That night, I went home to our small apartment above Oliver's favorite used bookstore and found him exactly where I expected, hunched over his laptop, surrounded by empty coffee cups and pages of handwritten code. His hair was messy, his glasses were crooked, and there was a hole in the elbow of his sweater. He looked up when I walked in, his whole face lighting up like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "How was the party? Did you have fun?" I should have told him about the intervention, about the bets and the judgment, and the way my own family was treating our love like a joke. Instead, I kissed him and said it was perfect. Because here's what I knew that they didn't. Oliver Thorne was going to change the world. I could see it in the way he talked about neural networks and machine learning, in the patent applications stacked on our kitchen table, and the calls he was getting from investors who actually understood what he was building. But even I couldn't have predicted what would happen 18 months later. The morning of our first wedding anniversary, I woke up to Oliver shaking me gently, his eyes wide open with something between shock and elation. "Cass," he whispered, holding up his phone, "we need to talk. Nextstream just got acquired by Techno Global Corporation for $4.2 billion. I stared at him, the words not quite registering. $4.2 billion? What does that mean? I asked, still half asleep.
Oliver sat down on the edge of our bed, running his hands through his hair. "It means I'm now worth more money than I can spend in 10 lifetimes. It means everyone who thought you were crazy for marrying me is about to eat their words. And it means," he smiled, that same sweet smile that made me fall in love with him, "we can finally afford to fix the air conditioning." That afternoon, as news of the acquisition hit the financial blogs and Oliver's net worth became public knowledge, my phone started buzzing. First one call, then 10, then 50. Text messages flooded in. Social media mentions exploded. Suddenly, everyone who had spent 2 years predicting our divorce wanted to congratulate us on our fairy tale romance. But by then, I had already started planning something that would make our love story legendary and their betrayal unforgettable. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. What do you do when you realize the people who claim to have your best interests at heart were actually rooting for your failure? The engagement party at the grand ballroom of the Willowbrook Hotel should have been magical. I had spent weeks planning every detail: the ivory and gold color scheme, the jazz quartet, the menu featuring Oliver's favorite foods. I wanted it to be perfect because I knew this would be their first real chance to get to know the man I was going to marry. Instead, it became a 2-hour public humiliation disguised as celebration. The moment Oliver and I walked in, I could feel the shift in the room. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes tracked us with the kind of curiosity reserved for car accidents. My mother had invited everyone: family, college friends, work colleagues, neighbors from our old street in Cedarview. Over 100 people gathered to witness what they clearly saw as my spectacular fall from grace. Oliver looked handsome in his navy suit, the one good one he owned, pressed and cleaned for the occasion. His hair was freshly cut, his shoes polished. He'd even bought new glasses frames because he knew photos would be taken. But I watched as eyes lingered on his off-the-rack suit, his modest watch, the way he seemed genuinely excited to meet everyone instead of playing it cool. "Is that him?" I heard my cousin Rebecca whisper to her husband Marcus near the champagne fountain. "He looks like he should be fixing her computer, not marrying her." The speeches were worse than I could have imagined. My father, Thomas, stood up with a crystal flute in his hand and what he probably thought was a supportive smile on his face. "Cassandra has always been our little dreamer," he began, and I already knew where this was heading. "She's got such a big heart, always wanting to help people, sometimes even when they don't deserve it. We're not sure what she sees in Oliver." More laughter, less polite this time. "But if he makes our girl happy, well, we'll learn to love him too." I felt Oliver's hand tighten around mine under the table. His smile never wavered, but I knew him well enough to see the hurt flicker behind his eyes. Then Penelope took the microphone. My sister, my maid of honor, the person who had helped me pick out the engagement ring settings, stood up and delivered what she probably thought was a loving roast. "My sister has always had a savior complex," she said, her voice carrying perfectly across the silent room. "In high school, she dated the guy with the broken motorcycle. In college, it was the one who couldn't afford textbooks. And now," she gestured toward Oliver with her champagne glass, "she's found someone who really needs her help." The laughter that followed wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was cruel. I looked around the room and saw faces I'd known my entire life: aunts who had taught me to braid friendship bracelets, family friends who had cheered at my high school graduation, college roommates who had held my hair back during freshman year parties. all of them laughing at the man I loved. But the absolute worst moment came during the gift opening. We hadn't asked for presents. We'd specifically said no gifts on the invitation, but people brought them anyway. Most were thoughtful. Kitchen gadgets, picture frames, a beautiful throw blanket from Oliver's sister who had driven 4 hours from Riverside to be there. Then Jasmine and Natasha presented their gift, a beautifully wrapped box with a card that read, "For the happy couple's future." Inside was a book titled Financial Planning for Couples When One Partner Earns More, and a gift certificate for marriage counseling sessions. The room went dead silent. Oliver picked up the book, read the title, and set it down gently. His smile never wavered, but I watched his neck flush red above his collar. "Thank you," he said simply. "That's very thoughtful." After the party, as we were walking to Oliver's Honda in the hotel parking lot, I finally exploded. "I can't believe they did that to you, to us. That was humiliating." Oliver stopped walking and turned to face me. "Cass, it's okay. I know they're just worried about you." "Worried?" I was practically shouting now. "They weren't worried, Oliver. They were entertained. Did you see them? They think you're a joke. They think our entire relationship is some kind of charity case." He was quiet for a long moment, keys jingling in his hand. "Do you?" he asked finally. "Do I what? Think I'm a joke? Think you're settling?"
The fact that he even had to ask broke my heart. This brilliant, kind, ambitious man who stayed up until dawn perfecting code that would revolutionize data processing, who remembered my coffee order and the names of all my coworkers, who had proposed with a ring he'd saved for 8 months to buy, was questioning his worth because of their cruelty. "Oliver Thorne," I said, grabbing his face in my hands, "you are the smartest, most innovative person I know. In 5 years, they're all going to wish they had been nicer to you." He kissed me then, right there in the hotel parking lot, and said, "5 years is a long time to wait for vindication." I had no idea it would only take 18 months. The worst part wasn't even the public humiliation. It was what happened after. In private conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. 2 weeks later, I was picking up my dress from alterations at Bridal Elegance in downtown Millbrook when I heard Penelope's voice from the next fitting room. "I give it 2 years, max," she was saying to someone. Later, I realized it was our cousin Rebecca. "She'll get tired of being the breadwinner. Mark my words, by the time she's 31, she'll be divorced and dating someone who can actually afford to take her somewhere nice for dinner." "But she seems happy," Rebecca replied. "She seems desperate," Penelope shot back. "Look, I love my sister, but she's always been too emotional about these things. She thinks love conquers all, but wait until she realizes she's married to a man who can't even afford a decent apartment without her salary." Standing there in my wedding dress, listening to my sister place bets on my marriage's expiration date, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was entertainment at my expense and Oliver's. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started documenting their comments, taking screenshots of group chat messages, recording conversations where they mocked Oliver's clothes, his car, his cute little startup. I told myself I was just keeping track, just in case I needed proof someday of how they really felt. I had no idea that someday was coming sooner than any of us expected, and when it did, I would be ready to show them exactly what they had underestimated. The morning after I overheard Penelope placing bets on my marriage's expiration date, I woke up with a clarity that felt like stepping out of fog. For 2 years, I had been making excuses for their behavior. They're protective. They want what's best for me. They just need time to see Oliver's potential. But lying there in our small bedroom, listening to Oliver's steady breathing beside me, I finally understood the truth. They didn't want what was best for me. They wanted me to fail so they could feel better about their own choices. I started paying attention to patterns I had been too blind to see before.
At family dinners, they would ask Oliver about his little project with the kind of patronizing interest adults use when talking to children about their imaginary friends. When we announced we were saving for a house, my mother immediately offered to lend us money, then spent the next hour explaining why we should look in more affordable neighborhoods like Pinecrest or Oakview, areas where the houses were half the price of the Maplewood district where Oliver and I actually wanted to live. "We just want you to be realistic about your budget," Delilah said, stirring her tea with the same silver spoon she'd inherited from her grandmother. "On Oliver's income, well, maybe you should focus on finding something modest." What she didn't say, but what hung in the air like smoke, was that she expected me to be the primary breadwinner forever, that Oliver would never contribute equally, that I was essentially a single woman who happened to share a bed with a financially dependent roommate. The breaking point came 3 weeks before our wedding, during what was supposed to be our final dress fitting. I had chosen a small, intimate ceremony, partly because Oliver preferred it that way, but mostly because I couldn't bear the thought of another public spectacle where my family could humiliate him in front of more people. Penelope and Jasmine had insisted on coming to the fitting, claiming they wanted to help with last-minute details. Instead, they spent the entire appointment at Enchanted Moments Bridal making passive-aggressive comments about everything from the dress. "Are you sure you don't want something more festive? You only get married once, hopefully," to the venue. "The Riverside Garden Center is charming. I'm sure Oliver loves that you're keeping costs down for him." But the moment that shattered my denial completely came when Mrs. Henderson, the seamstress, complimented Oliver's patience during the lengthy process of hemming adjustments. "Your fiancé seems like such a supportive young man. He waited 3 hours last week while we worked on the bodice alterations, never complained once. You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat service workers." Jasmine actually snorted. "Oh, Oliver's great at waiting. He's had lots of practice waiting for Cassie to pay for things." The room went silent. Mrs. Henderson, who had been pinning my hem, actually stopped mid-motion and looked up with confusion. Penelope tried to smooth it over with a laugh. "She's just joking. Oliver's very patient." But I saw Mrs. Henderson's expression change. She had worked with hundreds of couples over decades of alterations, and she recognized cruelty when she saw it. After they left, she pulled me aside.
"Honey," she said gently, "I've been doing this for 38 years, and I've seen all kinds of families. But I've never seen a man look at a woman the way your fiancé looks at you. Don't let other people's bitterness poison what you two have." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I created a new group chat, just Oliver and me, and I called it Team Thorn. Then I sent him a message that I should have sent months earlier. "I'm done apologizing for choosing you. I'm done making excuses for people who don't deserve them. From now on, it's us against the world." His response came immediately. "It's always been us against the world. I was just waiting for you to realize it." The next morning, I implemented my first boundary. When Delilah called to discuss last-minute changes to the seating chart, she wanted to seat Oliver's family at a back table so they wouldn't feel out of place among our friends. I cut her off mid-sentence. "Mom, stop. We've already finalized the seating. Oliver's family will sit exactly where we planned, at the front, because they're important to us. If you have a problem with that, you can discuss it with your therapist, not with me." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. "Cassandra Marie Rivers," she said finally, using my full name like I was 12 years old again. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude is unbecoming. We're your family. We've supported you through everything." "Have you?" I asked, because supporting me would mean celebrating my happiness, not questioning my judgment. Supporting me would mean getting to know Oliver instead of dismissing him. Supporting me would mean trusting that I'm smart enough to choose the right partner for myself. "We just think—" "I don't care what you think," I interrupted, and the words felt like breaking free from chains I hadn't realized were there. "I'm marrying Oliver in 12 days. You can either show up and be happy for us, or you can stay home and explain to people why you missed your daughter's wedding. But I'm done listening to commentary about my choices." I hung up before she could respond. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts. Penelope, Mom is crying. What is wrong with you? Thomas, call your mother and apologize right now. Even cousins I barely spoke to were weighing in with messages about family loyalty and respecting your elders. But the message that surprised me most came from Oliver's sister, Lydia, who had been quietly observing our family dynamics for months. She texted me, I don't know what you said to your mom, but Oliver just called me laughing. He said you finally found your backbone. About time. That evening, Oliver came home from the office to find me systematically going through our wedding invitation list, crossing out names. What are you doing? He asked, hanging his jacket on the back of our mismatched dining chairs. I'm doing quality control, I replied. I'm uninviting anyone who spent the last 6 months treating our relationship like a joke. He sat down beside me and looked at the growing list of crossed-out names. Cass, these are your family members, your oldest friends. No, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. These are people who have been counting down the days until they can say, I told you so, at our divorce. Real family celebrates your happiness. Real friends trust your judgment. Oliver was quiet for a moment, then reached over and took the pen from my hand. Next to my cousin Rebecca's name, he drew a firm black line. She called you desperate at the engagement party, he said simply. I heard her. We spent the next 2 hours going through the list together, and with each name we crossed out, I felt lighter. By the time we were finished, our guest list had shrunk from 85 people to 37, but every single person remaining was someone who genuinely wanted to celebrate our love. Are you sure about this? Oliver asked as we surveyed our dramatically reduced invitation pile. I leaned over and kissed him, tasting freedom on my own lips. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The calls started again the next morning. This time, I let them all go to voicemail, because I finally understood something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Their criticism had never been about protecting me. It had been about protecting their own egos. They needed me to fail so they wouldn't have to examine their own compromises, their own settling, their own fears about taking risks on love. But I was done being their cautionary tale. It was time to start writing my own story. 3 days after I cut our wedding guest list in half, Penelope showed up at my office unannounced. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting for the Henderson Electronics campaign when my assistant, Carrie, knocked on the conference room door with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but your sister is here. She says it's urgent. I could feel my colleague's eyes on me as I excused myself, already dreading whatever confrontation was about to unfold. Penelope was pacing in the reception area, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. She was dressed for battle in her power suit, the black Armani she wore to court when she needed to intimidate opposing counsel. We need to talk now, she said without preamble. I'm in a meeting, Penelope. Can this wait until...
No, it cannot wait. Her voice carried that authoritative tone she'd perfected in law school, the one that had made our parents so proud when she graduated summa cum laude from Thornfield Law. You've lost your mind, Cassandra, and someone needs to stage an intervention before you destroy everything. I led her to my office and closed the door, already knowing this conversation was going to be ugly. Penelope had always been the golden child, the one with the prestigious career, the penthouse apartment in Summerfield Heights, the marriage to Jonathan Blackthorne, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the Tri-City area. She wasn't used to anyone, especially her younger sister, refusing to follow her advice. Mom is having panic attacks, she began without sitting down. Dad hasn't slept in 3 days. You've uninvited half the family from your own wedding over some ridiculous tantrum, and now you're not returning anyone's calls. What exactly do you think you're accomplishing? I settled behind my desk, grateful for the physical barrier between us. I'm accomplishing peace of mind. I'm marrying someone I love, and I refuse to let that day be ruined by people who've spent 2 years undermining my relationship. Undermining? Penelope's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. We've been trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Oliver is a nice enough guy, but he's completely wrong for you. You're a senior account manager at one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the state.
You drive a BMW. You vacation in the Hamptons. What's he gonna do when you want to upgrade your lifestyle, when you want to join the country club or send your kids to private school? Maybe I don't want those things, I said quietly. Maybe I want something real instead of something that looks good on social media. Don't be naive. Penelope finally sat down, leaning forward with the intensity she usually reserved for closing arguments. Love doesn't pay mortgages, Cassie. Passion doesn't fund retirement accounts. I've seen too many women sacrifice their futures for men who can't match their ambition. Like you did with Jonathan? I asked, and watched her face freeze. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you married someone for his trust fund and his family name, not for love. The silence that followed was deafening. Penelope's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something vulnerable underneath. Then it snapped back into place. Jonathan and I have a partnership, she said coldly. We both bring value to the relationship: financial security, social connections, shared goals. What does Oliver bring besides good intentions and a computer? He brings innovation, intelligence, and integrity. He brings a work ethic that puts everyone in this family to shame. He brings kindness and loyalty, and he brings debt. Student loans, a failing startup, and an apartment that smells like instant ramen. Face reality, Cassie. You're 29 years old. This is your last chance to marry well, and you're throwing it away on someone who can't even afford to take you to dinner before checking his bank balance first. I stood up slowly, feeling something crystallize inside me. Get out. What? Get out of my office. Get out of my life. I'm done listening to you dissect my relationship like it's some kind of business transaction. Penelope blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct dismissal. You can't be serious. I'm deadly serious. For 2 years, I've listened to you and Mom and everyone else tell me that love isn't enough, that I should choose security over happiness, that I should settle for someone I don't even like because he has the right credit score. But you know what? I'd rather eat instant ramen with someone who adores me than caviar with someone who sees me as a merger opportunity. You're being ridiculous. Am I? When's the last time Jonathan looked at you the way Oliver looks at me? When's the last time he surprised you with something thoughtful, not expensive? When's the last time you had a conversation about something other than property investments and tax shelters? Penelope's composure cracked completely. That's not fair. Isn't it? You married someone who could maintain your lifestyle, not someone who could make you happy. And now you can't stand watching me choose differently because it forces you to examine your own choices. She was on her feet now, her face flushed with anger. At least I won't be struggling to pay bills in 10 years. At least I won't be embarrassed to introduce my husband at professional events. At least what, Penelope? At least you'll be miserable in comfort? The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. I watched my sister's face cycle through emotions: fury, hurt, and finally something that looked almost like recognition. Oliver doesn't deserve you, she said finally, but her voice had lost its conviction. I agree. He deserves someone who's been in his corner from the beginning, someone who believed in him before the world validated him, someone who chose him not despite his circumstances, but because of his character. Penelope gathered her purse with sharp, angry movements. Don't come crying to me when this falls apart. I won't, I said simply, but I also won't be coming to you for anything else. Congratulations, Penelope. You just lost a sister over a man you've never bothered to really know. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might try to salvage what was left of our relationship. Instead, she turned back with one final shot.
Mom wants to have lunch tomorrow at the Rosewood Country Club. She's invited Aunt Patricia and Grandmother Eleanor. They want to discuss your situation and see if there's still time to postpone the wedding until you come to your senses. I almost laughed. Tell them I'm busy. Busy doing what? Busy being happy. Busy planning a life with someone who thinks I'm worth fighting for. Busy not caring what any of you think about my choices anymore. After she left, I sat in my office for 20 minutes, shaking from adrenaline. Then I picked up my phone and called Oliver. "How did the meeting go?" he asked immediately. "Which meeting?" "With your sister." Carrie texted me that she showed up looking like she was ready to declare war. I smiled despite everything. Oliver had asked Carrie to keep him informed about anything that might upset me during wedding week. Even my office assistant was more protective of me than my own family. "It went exactly like you'd expect," I said. "She tried to convince me I'm making a mistake. I told her to get out of my life, and now they're planning some kind of family intervention at the country club tomorrow." "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect. For the first time in years, I'm absolutely perfect." That night, Oliver surprised me with takeout from Bamboo Garden and a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for our wedding night. "What's this for?" I asked as he poured 2 glasses of Dom Perignon. "This is for choosing us," he said, raising his glass. "This is for being brave enough to cut out the poison so we can grow. And this is for showing me what unconditional love actually looks like." As we sat on our secondhand couch, eating Chinese food from paper containers and drinking champagne from coffee mugs because we didn't own proper flutes, I realized something profound. I had never been happier. Not at any fancy restaurant, not at any expensive event, not during any moment when I was trying to live up to someone else's expectations. I was happiest right here, with the man everyone thought I was settling for, in the life everyone thought was beneath me. And in 6 months, when the world learned what Oliver was really worth, I would remember this moment as the night I chose love over approval and discovered they were never mutually exclusive to begin with. The morning after my confrontation with Penelope, I made a decision that would make it impossible for me to ever go back to being the accommodating daughter who swallowed her opinions to keep the peace. I was going to make my boundaries public, permanent, and undeniable. I started by changing my emergency contact information at work, at the bank, at my doctor's office, everywhere my family was listed. Oliver was now my primary contact for everything. Then I went further. I removed them from my social media accounts entirely. Not blocked, not unfriended, simply deleted from my life as if they had never existed. But the real statement came when I posted something I had been thinking about for weeks. A single photo of Oliver and me from our recent weekend trip to Crescent Lake, where we had gone hiking and stayed in a cabin that cost $60 a night. In the picture, we're both laughing, our faces sunburned and our clothes wrinkled from sleeping in a tent. Oliver's hair is messy, his t-shirt has a small hole near the collar, and he's wearing the same hiking boots he's had since college. I'm makeup-free, my hair in a ponytail, and wearing a flannel shirt I bought at a thrift store. The caption I wrote was simple. Some people measure worth by net worth. I measure it by the worth of someone's character. In 6 days, I'm marrying my best friend, my partner, and the most genuine person I know. To everyone who thinks I'm settling, you're right. I'm settling for nothing less than authentic love. Within an hour, the post had 50 likes and dozens of comments from colleagues, college friends, and acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. But more importantly, it had been shared by people I didn't even know. Friends of friends who were apparently inspired by what they saw as a rejection of superficial values. "This is what real love looks like," commented my former colleague Sarah Martinez. Not the Instagram perfect couples with matching designer outfits, but 2 people who choose each other every day. "Your happiness is radiant in this photo," wrote my college professor, Dr. Williams. "Authentic joy can't be faked or bought." But the comment that made my chest tight with emotion came from Oliver's mother, Dorothy, who lived 3 hours away in Millfield. "I have never seen my son as happy as he's been since he met you. Thank you for seeing his heart before the world sees his success." That last line made me pause. Dorothy knew something the rest of us didn't yet. Something about Oliver's work that even I was only beginning to understand. But her comment was prophetic in ways none of us could have imagined.
By afternoon, my post had been shared over 300 times. Someone had screenshotted it and posted it to a Twitter account called Real Love Stories, where it gained even more traction. Suddenly, strangers were commenting about their own experiences choosing love over financial security, about family members who had doubted their relationships, about the pressure to marry for status rather than substance. I was in a client meeting when my assistant, Carrie, knocked on the door again, but this time she was smiling.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Channel 7 News just called. They want to interview you about your viral post for their evening segment on modern love stories. Apparently, you've started some kind of movement. My client, Robert Chen from Meridian Tech Solutions, actually laughed. Cassandra, I saw that post this morning. My wife shared it with all her book club friends. You've got half the city talking about what real love looks like. That evening, I found myself sitting in a television studio across from Rebecca Stone, the lifestyle reporter for WKRN Channel 7. The segment was called Love in the Age of Social Media, and I was apparently their poster child for authentic relationships. Your post has been shared over 2,000 times in just 8 hours, Rebecca said, leaning forward with genuine interest. What message were you trying to send? I looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere in the city my family was probably watching. I was trying to say that love shouldn't be a business transaction, that choosing someone for their character instead of their bank account isn't settling, it's smart, and that the people who truly love you will celebrate your happiness, not question your judgment. Some viewers have reached out saying your story reminds them of their own family conflicts over relationship choices. What would you say to someone facing similar criticism? I would say that other people's opinions about your relationship are none of your business. The only people who need to believe in your love are you and your partner. Everyone else is just commentary. The interview aired that night during the dinner hour, reaching thousands of homes across the metro area. By the time Oliver and I sat down to watch it together, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and messages from numbers I didn't recognize. But the call that mattered most came from someone unexpected, my high school English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who had retired 5 years earlier. Cassandra, dear, her familiar voice said when I picked up. I just watched your interview and I had to call. Do you remember what I used to tell your class about courage? I smiled, remembering her favorite quote that she had written on the whiteboard every single day. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's feeling the fear and doing what's right anyway. I remember, Mrs. Patterson. You're living that quote, sweetheart. I've taught thousands of students over 40 years, and I can count on one hand the number who had the courage to choose authenticity over approval. Your parents raised a remarkable young woman, even if they can't see it right now. That night, as Oliver and I were getting ready for bed, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Are you sure about all this? He asked quietly. The interview, the social media attention, cutting off your family? Once we're married, there's no going back to the way things were. I sat down beside him on our bed, taking his hands in mine. Oliver, do you remember the night we met? At the TechCrunch meetup at Brewster's Pub? He laughed. You spilled coffee on my laptop. And you laughed instead of getting angry. You helped me clean it up, and then you spent 2 hours explaining your app concept to someone who barely understood basic coding. You didn't care that I worked in marketing instead of tech, or that I was wearing a dress that cost more than your monthly food budget. You just saw someone you wanted to talk to. I saw someone I wanted to know everything about, he corrected. That's when I knew. Not when I decided you were good enough for me, but when I realized I wanted to become someone worthy of that kind of genuine interest. You make me want to be the best version of myself, not some performed version that other people approve of. Oliver was quiet for a long moment, then reached over to his nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box I had never seen before. I was saving this for our wedding day, he said, opening it to reveal a delicate gold Geistlight with a small charm in the shape of a compass. But I think you should have it now. I held up the bracelet, examining the tiny compass that actually moved, its needle pointing steadily north. It's beautiful, I whispered. What does it mean? It means that no matter how lost everyone else gets,
No matter how many people try to point us in different directions, we'll always know which way is true north. We'll always find our way back to each other. As he fastened the bracelet around my wrist, I felt something shift inside me. Not just love, but absolute certainty. In 3 days, I would marry this man in front of 37 people who genuinely celebrated our happiness. Everyone else could watch from the sidelines or not watch at all. The next morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. Saw your interview last night. Some people think they're too good for happiness. You're not one of them. Congratulations on choosing love. It was signed simply, a fellow rule breaker. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Oliver with my own note. 1 year from today, everyone who doubted us is going to pretend they supported us from the beginning, but we'll remember who was really in our corner. I had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. The morning of our wedding rehearsal, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since 4 a.m., and when I finally looked at the screen, my blood ran cold.
The first message was from my college roommate, Amy, who lived in Portland. Cass, I don't know what's happening, but someone is posting horrible things about you online. Call me. The second was from my boss at Brennan & Associates. Need to speak with you ASAP. There's been some concerning activity on social media that could affect client relationships. But it was the third message from Oliver's sister Lydia that made my hands shake. They've created fake accounts. They're trying to destroy your reputation before the wedding. Oliver is handling it, but you need to see this. I stumbled to the kitchen where Oliver was already at his laptop, his face grim in the blue light of the screen. Coffee sat untouched beside him, and I could tell from the tension in his shoulders that he'd been dealing with this for hours. How bad is it? I asked, dreading the answer. He turned the screen toward me, and I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Someone had created a Twitter account called The Real Cassandra Rivers that was posting screenshot after screenshot of fabricated text messages, fake social media conversations, and doctored images designed to make me look manipulative, gold-digging, and desperate. The posts painted a picture of someone who had deliberately targeted Oliver for his family money, which didn't exist, who had been secretly dating other men throughout our relationship, and who had been supposedly caught making racist comments about Oliver's background. None of it was true, but it was crafted with enough sophistication to look believable at first glance. There are 12 different accounts, Oliver said quietly, all created in the last 48 hours. They're posting on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Someone spent serious money on this campaign. The fake accounts had names like Concerned Friend, Millbrook Insider, and Former Colleague. Each one claimed to have insider knowledge about my real character. The posts were being shared by other newly created accounts, creating an echo chamber of false outrage. But the cruelest fake post was a screenshot of a supposed group chat where I was allegedly laughing about Oliver's financial situation and calling him my charity case project until someone better comes along. The fake messages even included specific details about our relationship that only someone close to us would know. Details that could have only come from my family. Oliver, I said, my voice barely a whisper, some of these details, the restaurant where we had our first date, the fact that you were wearing a blue shirt when you proposed, the name of the hiking trail where we took that photo. Only my family knows these things. His jaw tightened. I know. I've been documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, IP addresses where possible. This isn't some random internet harassment. This is coordinated. My phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson from Henderson Electronics, one of our biggest clients at Brennan & Associates. Cassandra, I'm calling because my daughter showed me some very disturbing posts about you on social media. While your personal life is typically none of my business, the things being said reflect on your character and, by extension, on your company's credibility. Mr. Henderson, those posts are completely fabricated. Someone is trying to... I don't know what to believe. But I can't have my company associated with this kind of controversy. I'm requesting that Brennan & Associates assign a different account manager to our portfolio. The line went dead. Within the next hour, 2 more clients had called with similar concerns. By noon, I was sitting in my boss's office trying to explain why my personal life was suddenly threatening the company's reputation.
Margaret Brennan, the founding partner, was a woman I'd always respected. She'd built the agency from nothing, and she had a reputation for loyalty to her employees. But I could see the concern in her eyes as she scrolled through the fake posts on her tablet. Cassandra, I've worked with you for 3 years. I know your character, but our clients are spooked, and in this business, perception can become reality very quickly. Mrs. Brennan, every single one of these posts is fabricated. I can provide proof that she held up a hand. I believe you, but I need you to take emergency leave until this gets sorted out. Full pay, no questions asked, but you can't be client-facing while this is happening. I left the office feeling like I was walking through a nightmare. Someone had weaponized social media against me with surgical precision, timing the attack to cause maximum damage right before my wedding. And the sophistication of the campaign meant this wasn't the work of internet trolls. This was personal, organized, and expensive. When I got home, Oliver was on the phone with someone, his voice sharp with controlled anger. No, Detective Morrison, I understand that cyberbullying isn't a priority for the police department, but this is a coordinated harassment campaign that's affecting my fiancé's livelihood. Yes, I understand you need concrete proof of who's behind it. He hung up, frustrated. The police say unless we can prove who's doing this, it's just internet drama. But I've been thinking, and I might have an idea. What kind of idea? Oliver pulled up a new browser window and showed me a website I'd never seen before, something called Digital Forensic Solutions. He called his friend Marcus from college, who specializes in tracking online harassment campaigns. He says the coordination and timing of these attacks suggests they were planned by someone with resources and inside information about our relationship.
Within 2 hours, Marcus Chen had arrived at our apartment with a laptop bag and a grim expression. He was a quiet man in his early 30s who worked for a cybersecurity firm downtown. And he had the kind of intense focus that made me believe he could solve problems other people couldn't even see. "This is sophisticated work," he said after examining the fake accounts for an hour. "Whoever did this knows how to mask IP addresses and create believable fake personas. But they made one crucial mistake. They used information that's too specific. The person behind this has access to private details about your relationship." "We know it's my family," I said. "The question is how to prove it." Marcus smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Oh, we're going to do more than prove it. We're going to trace every post, every account, every shared piece of content back to its source. And then we're going to document everything in a way that can be used legally." He worked through the night, mapping connections between accounts, analyzing posting patterns, and building what he called a harassment flowchart that showed how the fake information was being amplified across different platforms. By morning, he had an answer that was both shocking and completely predictable. "The central coordination is coming from 3 IP addresses," he said, showing us a map on his screen. "One traces back to a residence in Summerfield Heights. That's your sister's neighborhood. One comes from the Rosewood Country Club's Wi-Fi network. And one is from a law office downtown, Blackthorne, Sterling and Associates. Penelope's husband's firm. They're not just trying to ruin your wedding, they're trying to destroy your professional reputation so thoroughly that you'll have no choice but to come back to them for support. It's psychological warfare disguised as internet trolling." Oliver's hands were clenched into fists. "How do we stop them?" Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. "We don't stop them. We let them finish what they started, and then we show the world exactly who they really are. But first, we need to document everything they're doing because in about 6 months, when this story gets told properly, people are going to need to see receipts." I looked at both of them, feeling something cold and determined settle in my chest. "What do you mean, when this story gets told properly?" "I mean," Marcus said, pulling up a new document on his screen, "we're going to let them think they won. And then we're going to make sure that everyone, your family, your clients, every single person who believed their lies understands exactly what kind of people orchestrate a character assassination campaign against someone whose only crime was choosing love over status." That night, as Oliver and I sat in our living room surrounded by printouts and laptops, I realized that my family hadn't just crossed a line, they had revealed who they truly were. And now I had the evidence to prove it. The insider revelation came from the last person I expected,
My own mother. It was our wedding day. Oliver and I had decided to go through with the ceremony despite everything that had happened in the past week. 37 guests were gathered at Riverside Garden Center, and I was in the bridal suite putting on my grandmother's pearl necklace when there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," I called, expecting it to be Lydia with my bouquet. Instead, Delilah Rivers stepped into the room, and I barely recognized her. My mother, who had never left the house without perfect makeup and coordinated accessories, looked exhausted. Her usually immaculate hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face was bare of makeup, and she was wearing jeans, something I hadn't seen her do in public since I was 12 years old. "Mom!" I stood up, my wedding dress rustling around me. "What are you doing here?" She closed the door behind her and leaned against it as if she needed the support. "I came to stop a wedding, but not the way you think." For a moment, I thought she was going to launch into another plea for me to reconsider marrying Oliver. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I came to give you this," she said, holding it out to me. "Everything is on here. Every message, every plan, every horrible thing we did. I can't live with it anymore." I stared at the phone like it was a snake. "What are you talking about?" Delilah's voice broke. "The fake accounts, the lies, the campaign to destroy your reputation. It was all planned. Penelope organized it, Jonathan's law firm provided technical support, and God help me, I gave them the personal information they needed to make it believable." My legs went weak. I sat down hard on the vanity chair, my wedding dress pooling around me. "You're telling me that my own mother helped orchestrate a cyberbullying campaign against me? We thought—" She started, then stopped. "No, that's not true. I knew it was wrong. I knew it from the beginning, but Penelope convinced me that it was an intervention, that we were saving you from making a terrible mistake. She said if we could just delay the wedding long enough, you'd see reason."
She sat down on the small sofa across from me, her hands shaking as she continued. "The plan was to create enough professional and social pressure that you'd postpone the wedding. Penelope said once you had time to think clearly, without Oliver's influence, you'd realize we were right. She called it tough love." I took the phone with trembling fingers and started scrolling through her message history. What I found made my stomach turn. There was a group chat called Project Intervention with Penelope, Jonathan, my father Thomas, and even my Aunt Patricia. The messages went back 3 weeks. Penelope: "The social media posts need to be subtle at first. We don't want to look like we're behind this." Jonathan: "My IT guy says we can create accounts that look like they've been active for months. Just need some personal details to make the fake messages believable." Thomas: "Are we sure this is necessary? Maybe we should just talk to her again." Penelope: "Dad, talking hasn't worked. She's completely brainwashed. We need to show her what marrying beneath her station will do to her reputation." But the message that broke my heart was from my mother. "I have photos from their hiking trip, details about their first date, and information about his proposal. How much do you need?" I looked up at Delilah, who was crying silently. "You gave them ammunition to destroy me." "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "Penelope showed me articles about women who married men who couldn't support them financially, about how those marriages fail at higher rates, about how love isn't enough to sustain a relationship long term. She made charts, Cassandra, actual charts with statistics about income disparities in marriages. So you decided to ruin my career and humiliate me publicly? We never meant for it to go so far." Delilah's voice was barely audible. "It was supposed to be a few negative comments, maybe some questions about your judgment that would make you pause and reconsider. But once Jonathan's people got involved, it became this monster." I scrolled through more messages, each one worse than the last. There were screenshots of the fake posts before they went live, discussions about timing the attack for maximum impact, even conversations about which of my professional relationships they should target. Jonathan: "If we can get Henderson Electronics to drop her, Brennan and Associates will have to take action.
Professional consequences are more effective than personal embarrassment. Penelope. Perfect. She'll realize that choosing Oliver means choosing professional suicide. She's too ambitious to accept that. But there was one message thread that made everything clear. It was between Penelope and someone named D. Morrison. And with a chill, I realized this was Detective Morrison, the police officer who had dismissed Oliver's harassment report. Penelope, thank you for handling this discreetly. We appreciate you treating this as a family matter rather than a legal one. D. Morrison, happy to help. Cyberbullying cases are rarely prosecutable anyway, and this sounds like typical pre-wedding family drama. My mother saw me reading and broke down completely. Penelope knows Detective Morrison's wife from the country club. She asked him to discourage any police investigation as a personal favor. We corrupted everything, Cassandra. We turned your own wedding week into psychological warfare. I stood up slowly, my mind racing. Mom, do you understand what you just handed me? This isn't just proof of what you did. This is evidence of conspiracy, harassment, potentially criminal interference with my career, and police corruption. I know, she said through her tears. That's why I'm here. Because 24 hours ago, I realized that if you go through with this wedding, after everything we've put you through, then Oliver Thorne isn't just good enough for you. He's better than all of us combined, and you deserve someone better than us. There was another knock at the door. Cassie, Oliver's voice called through the wood. We need to start in 5 minutes. Are you ready? I looked at my mother, sitting on my bridal suite couch, in jeans and devastation, holding the phone that contained evidence of my family's calculated cruelty. Then I looked at myself in the mirror, wedding dress, grandmother's pearls, and an expression of absolute certainty. I'm ready, I called back to Oliver. Then I turned to Delilah. But first, we're going to make a phone call. I dialed Marcus Chen's number. He answered on the first ring. Marcus, it's Cassandra. I'm getting married in 5 minutes, but I need you to come to Riverside Garden Center immediately. My mother just handed me a complete confession and digital evidence of everything my family did. I want it documented and preserved before I walk down the aisle. Are you serious? Marcus's voice was sharp with excitement. They just confessed? I looked at my mother, who nodded through her tears. Complete confession. Text messages, planned coordination, even police corruption. And Marcus, I want you to start building a comprehensive report. Not for revenge, for justice. When I hung up, Delilah stood up slowly. What happens now? Now, you leave, I said firmly, but not unkindly. You don't get to be at my wedding after what you've done. But in 6 months, when the truth comes out and Oliver's success makes headlines, I want you to remember that you had a choice. You could have supported your daughter's happiness, or you could have tried to destroy it. You chose destruction, and now you get to live with that choice. She walked toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, seeing you in that dress, knowing you're going through with this wedding despite everything we did to stop it, I've never been more proud of you, and I've never been more ashamed of myself.
After she left, I sat alone for 2 minutes, processing what had just happened. My family hadn't just revealed their true nature, they had handed me complete documentation of their betrayal. And somehow, that felt like the wedding gift I never knew I needed. Because now, when Oliver and I stood up in front of our carefully chosen 37 guests and promised to love each other for better or worse, we would know exactly how much worse it could get, and exactly how much better it was about to become. 18 months after our wedding, I woke up to a phone call that would change everything. Mrs. Thorne, the voice on the other end said, "This is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes magazine. I'm calling because we're running a cover story next month titled The Billionaire Next Door, How Nextstream's Oliver Thorne Built a Fortune in Plain Sight, and we'd like to interview you about being married to one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Oliver was already in the shower, getting ready for another day at his expanded offices in the new Techno Global building downtown.
The acquisition had been finalized 6 months ago, and Oliver's personal net worth had officially hit $4.2 billion. But we'd been keeping the full extent of his wealth private while he transitioned into his new role as Chief Innovation Officer. "When does the story come out?" I asked. "Next Tuesday. We'll be releasing it simultaneously in print and online, with a full feature on our website and social media channels. Oliver's story is remarkable, building revolutionary AI technology while living in a studio apartment and driving a 10-year-old Honda. Our readers are fascinated by entrepreneurs who prioritize innovation over image." After I hung up, I called Marcus immediately. "The Forbes story comes out Tuesday. Are you ready?" "I've been ready for months," Marcus said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "I've compiled everything: the complete harassment campaign, the police corruption, the professional sabotage, all of it. Plus, I've been tracking how your family's behavior changed once rumors about Oliver's wealth started circulating." He was right about that. Over the past 6 months, as word spread quietly through Millbrook's professional circles that Oliver's startup had been acquired for an astronomical sum, my family's tone had shifted dramatically. The calls started in February. First, it was Penelope. "I've been thinking about our fight before your wedding. Maybe I was too harsh. Jonathan and I would love to have you both over for dinner." Then Thomas. "I saw an article about AI companies in the journal. Is Oliver's company doing well? We should catch up." Even Aunt Patricia, who called my marriage an embarrassment to the family name at Thanksgiving, suddenly wanted to reconnect. "I feel terrible about missing your wedding. Perhaps we could arrange a belated celebration." But I screenshotted every text, saved every voicemail, documented every attempt at reconciliation. Because Marcus and I both knew that once Oliver's wealth became public knowledge, their desperation would become undeniable. The Forbes article went live at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. By 6:15, my phone was exploding. The headline read, "From thrift store blazers to billion-dollar algorithms, the Oliver Thorne story." The article included photos of our small apartment, quotes from Oliver about choosing to live modestly while investing in his technology, and a sidebar about how his wife stood by him when others questioned her choice to marry an ordinary programmer. The journalist had done her homework. She'd interviewed Oliver's professors from Sterling Institute, colleagues from his early startup days, and even Mrs. Henderson from the bridal shop, who was quoted saying, "You could tell that young woman saw something special in him long before the world did. That's not settling, that's wisdom." But the detail that made my chest tight with vindication was a paragraph near the end. Thorne credits his wife's unwavering support during their courtship as crucial to his success. He said, "When everyone else saw a guy in secondhand clothes driving an old car, Cassandra saw the future. She believed in the technology before investors did, and she believed in me when my own future in-laws thought she was making a mistake." By noon, the story had been picked up by CNN, CNBC, and the Wall Street Journal. Oliver's photo was trending on social media, and suddenly everyone in Millbrook knew that the ordinary programmer was worth more than most Fortune 500 CEOs. The texts started immediately. Penelope, "Saw the Forbes article. So proud of you both. We should celebrate." Thomas, "Always knew Oliver was special. Dinner this weekend?" Jasmine, "OMG girl, I just saw the news. Your husband is on the cover of Forbes. We need to catch up." But the message that made me laugh out loud came from Detective Morrison's personal phone. "Congratulations to you and your husband on his success. Wishing you both the best." I forwarded all of them to Marcus, who responded within minutes. "It's showtime. Are you ready to release the report?" We had been planning this moment for months. Marcus had compiled what he called the Millbrook Files, a comprehensive 47-page document that detailed the entire harassment campaign, complete with screenshots, IP traces, witness statements, and a timeline that showed how my family's behavior correlated with rumors about Oliver's growing wealth.
The report included sections titled Digital Harassment Campaign, Professional Sabotage, Police Corruption, and Post-Success Reconciliation Attempts. Marcus had even created graphs showing the frequency of my family's contact attempts before and after news about Oliver's wealth began circulating.
But instead of releasing it immediately, I had a better idea. I created a simple social media post with a photo from our wedding day, the same authentic, joyful picture that had gone viral 18 months earlier. This time, my caption read, "To everyone asking how it feels to be married to a billionaire, it feels exactly the same as it did when he was just a programmer. Because I didn't marry his net worth, I married his character, and that was priceless long before Forbes noticed." Within 3 hours, the post had 50,000 likes and 8,000 shares. But comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with thousands of people praising me for seeing his worth before the world did and calling our story relationship goals. But then something happened that I hadn't expected. People started sharing their own stories in the comments. Women who had been criticized for their relationship choices, men who had been dismissed because of their economic status, couples who had faced family rejection for not meeting social expectations. The post became a movement. #WorthNotWealth started trending nationally, with thousands of people sharing stories about choosing love over status, character over bank accounts, potential over appearances. And that's when I knew it was time. I created a new post that evening, this time with a longer caption. Since my post this morning went viral, hundreds of people have shared their own stories about facing family criticism for their relationship choices. I want to share something that might help others dealing with similar situations. I attached Marcus's report as a PDF with the note, "This document details what happened when my family tried to sabotage my wedding because they thought I was settling." It includes evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign, professional interference, and attempts at reconciliation once my husband's success became public. I'm sharing this not for revenge, but to show others that family members who truly love you will support your happiness, not undermine it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 hours, the hashtag Millbrook Files was trending nationally. News outlets began covering the story not just as a tech success narrative, but as an expose of family manipulation and the dangers of judging relationships based on superficial criteria. CNN's headline read, "When Family Becomes Foe, the Dark Side of Social Expectations in Marriage." The New York Times ran an op-ed titled, "The Cost of Conditional Love: How Families Can Destroy What They Claim to Protect." But the coverage that satisfied me most came from our local Millbrook Gazette, which ran a front-page story with the headline, "Local Family's Harassment Campaign Exposed After Daughter's Husband Becomes a Billionaire." The article included quotes from Detective Morrison's supervisor, who announced an internal investigation into the handling of our harassment complaint. It featured interviews with my former clients, who expressed outrage that they had been manipulated into questioning my professional integrity based on fabricated evidence. Most importantly, it included a statement from Mrs. Patterson, my old English teacher. "I taught both Cassandra and her sister Penelope. One chose courage and one chose conformity. The results speak for themselves." By the end of the week, the story had reached international media. Oliver and I were invited to appear on Good Morning America, where the host asked me directly, "How does it feel to have been so publicly vindicated?" I looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere in Millbrook, my family was watching. I said, "It feels like justice. Not because my husband became wealthy, but because people can see that love based on character always wins over love based on circumstances." That afternoon, we received one final message. It was from Delilah, and it was brief. "You were right about everything. I'm proud of who you've become and ashamed of who I was. I understand why you can't forgive us, but I want you to know that watching you succeed in spite of us has taught me more about real strength than 40 years of country club memberships ever could."
I showed the message to Oliver, who read it quietly and handed the phone back. "What are you going to do?" I looked at him, this brilliant, kind, now internationally famous man who had loved me when I was still learning to love myself, and smiled. "Absolutely nothing," I said. "We have a life to live." 5 years after our wedding, I stood in the ballroom of the Grand View Hotel watching 300 guests arrive for the first annual Worth Over Wealth Foundation Gala. Oliver and I had created the foundation to provide scholarships for young entrepreneurs whose innovative ideas were being dismissed because of their backgrounds, their appearance, or their economic circumstances. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were hosting the event just 2 miles from the Rosewood Country Club, where my family had once plotted my downfall over champagne and judgment. Mrs. Thorne, my assistant David, approached with a tablet in hand. "The final guest confirmations are in. We have tech executives, venture capitalists, university presidents, and," he paused with a slight smile, "several journalists who covered your story when it first broke." I nodded, adjusting the diamond bracelet Oliver had given me for our 5th anniversary. Not because I needed expensive jewelry, but because he wanted to celebrate how far we had come from our thrift store beginnings. The bracelet was beautiful, but I still wore his compass charm on my other wrist, the one that reminded us to always find our true north. "Any word from the Riverside Academy about tonight's scholarship announcement?" I asked. "Dr. Martinez confirmed that Maya Santos will be here with her family. She's excited to meet you both."
Maya Santos was a 19-year-old coding prodigy from a working-class family in East Millbrook. Her professors at Riverside Community College had submitted her innovative app design to our foundation's scholarship program. But when she'd applied for traditional venture capital funding, investors had dismissed her ideas because she didn't fit their image of a fundable entrepreneur. She reminded me so much of Oliver in those early days, brilliant, determined, and underestimated by people who should have known better. Oliver appeared beside me, straightening his bow tie. 5 years of success had changed very little about him fundamentally. He still preferred simple clothes, still drove modestly, though he'd finally upgraded from the Honda to a 3-year-old Tesla, and still got more excited talking about technology than money. But he carried himself with a quiet confidence now, secure in the knowledge that his work was changing the world. "The documentary crew wants to start filming our entrance in 10 minutes, he said, referring to the Netflix team that was creating a feature-length documentary about our story. "Are you ready for this?" I looked around the ballroom, taking in the scene. 5 years ago, 37 people had witnessed us promise to love each other for better or worse. Tonight, 300 people were here to celebrate what we'd built together. Not just Oliver's technological innovations, but a foundation that had already awarded scholarships to over 200 young entrepreneurs whose ideas had been overlooked by traditional funding sources. "I'm ready," I said, then spotted someone who made me pause. "Oliver, look." Near the registration table, I saw a familiar figure in an elegant navy dress, checking in with the volunteer coordinators. It was Mrs. Henderson, the seamstress from Enchanted Moments Bridal, now in her 70s, but still sharp-eyed and observant. "Mrs. Henderson," I called out as we approached her, "I can't believe you're here." She turned and her face lit up with the same warm smile I remembered from our wedding dress fittings. "Cassandra, dear, I wouldn't miss this for the world. When I read about your foundation in the Millbrook Gazette, I knew I had to attend. You know, in 40 years of alterations, I saw hundreds of young brides, but I always remembered you." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because you were the only one who never asked me to make changes to accommodate other people's opinions. You knew exactly who you were and what you wanted. That's rare at any age, but especially at 29, when everyone thinks they know better than you do." The evening officially began with Oliver's keynote speech. He talked about the importance of seeing potential in unexpected places, about how innovation often comes from people who don't fit traditional molds, and about how some of history's greatest breakthroughs came from individuals who were initially dismissed or ridiculed. 5 years ago, he said, Looking directly at me, my wife faced criticism for choosing to marry someone who didn't meet other people's expectations. Tonight, we're celebrating young entrepreneurs who face that same kind of dismissal. The difference is, now they have support, funding, and a community that believes in substance over surface. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. I saw faces I recognized, colleagues from Brennan and Associates who had supported me through the harassment campaign, Oliver's family who had embraced me from the beginning, friends we'd made in the tech community who valued authenticity over appearances. But I also saw faces I didn't recognize, young people, older investors, academics, and activists who had come because they believed in what we were building. 5 years ago, my family tried to sabotage my wedding because they thought love wasn't a sound financial investment. They were wrong about love, but they were right about one thing. Marriage is an investment. It's an investment in each other's dreams, in each other's potential, and in a future you build together. I paused, finding Oliver's face in the audience. But the best investments aren't always the safest ones. Sometimes you have to bet on someone everyone else overlooks. Sometimes you have to choose the person with more potential than polish, more character than capital. The applause was warm, but I wasn't finished. Tonight, we're announcing our largest scholarship yet. Maya Santos, would you please join me on stage? Maya walked up, clearly nervous, but beaming with excitement. She was a small young woman with serious dark eyes and calloused hands from the restaurant job she'd been working to pay for college. Maya has developed an AI application that could revolutionize how small businesses manage inventory and customer service, I continued. Traditional investors passed on her idea because she didn't have the right background or connections. Tonight, the Worth Over Wealth Foundation is providing her with a full scholarship to Stanford's graduate program in computer science, plus seed funding to develop her app into a commercial product. The applause was thunderous. I watched Maya wipe away tears as she accepted the oversized check, and I felt the same satisfaction I'd experienced on our wedding day when I'd looked around at our 37 carefully chosen guests and realized that sometimes the smallest gatherings have the biggest impact. After the formal program ended, I was mingling with guests when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to find a young woman in her mid-20s with familiar eyes. Mrs. Thorne, I'm Emily Morrison. I don't know if you remember me, but... Oh, yes, of course. You're Detective Morrison's daughter.
She nodded, looking embarrassed. I wanted to apologize for what my father did. When the investigation came out and he lost his job over the corruption charges, I started reading about what happened to you. I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family thinks what he did was acceptable. I was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Emily, you don't need to apologize for your father's choices. But I appreciate you coming tonight. Are you interested in entrepreneurship? Actually, I'm a social worker now. I help families navigate crisis situations. Your story, it taught me a lot about how families can either support each other through difficult times or make everything worse. We talked for another few minutes, and I found myself thinking about cycles, how trauma and dysfunction can pass from generation to generation, but so can growth and wisdom. Emily had chosen to learn from her father's mistakes rather than repeat them. As the evening wound down, Oliver and I found ourselves on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the city lights of Millbrook, the same city where we'd met, where we'd been judged, where we'd fought for our right to choose each other. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your family had supported us from the beginning? Oliver asked, loosening his bow tie. I considered the question seriously. Honestly, I think we might not have become as strong. Their opposition forced us to be completely sure about each other. It made us focus on what really mattered. No regrets, then? I thought about Delilah's final message, about Penelope's current struggles with her own loveless marriage, about the cousin and friends who had slowly drifted back into our lives with
awkward apologies and transparent motivations. I thought about the opportunities their sabotage had cost me professionally, and the pain their betrayal had caused during what should have been the happiest time of my life. I regret that they missed out on knowing the real you, I said finally. I regret that they chose fear over love, status over substance. But I don't regret anything we did. We chose each other, and we chose authenticity, and we chose to build something meaningful, instead of just something that looked good from the outside. He pulled me closer, and I could smell his familiar cologne, the same one he'd worn on our first date, our wedding day, and every important moment since. "You know what I love most about tonight?" he asked. "What?" Every person in that ballroom chose to be here. Nobody came out of obligation or social pressure. They came because they believe in what we're doing. I smiled, thinking about our original wedding guest list, pared down to 37 people who genuinely celebrated our happiness. Just like our wedding. Just like our wedding, he agreed. As we stood there, looking out over the city where our love story had been tested and proven, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because we'd gotten revenge on the people who'd hurt us, but because we'd built something beautiful in spite of them. Tomorrow, Maya Santos would start her new life at Stanford. Next month, we'd award scholarships to 50 more young entrepreneurs whose potential had been overlooked. Next year, we'd open a mentorship program connecting successful business leaders with promising innovators from unconventional backgrounds. We weren't just living happily ever after. We were making sure that others could too. And somewhere in Millbrook, I hoped, there was another young woman facing criticism for her choices, who would see our story and remember that the best investments aren't always the safest ones. Sometimes you have to bet on love, character, and the courage to choose authenticity over approval. That's a story worth telling, and more importantly, it's a life worth living. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.